I knew something was off the moment Linda from HR knocked softly on my office door. Her voice was so faint you'd think she was afraid of her own shadow. "Evelyn," she said, "you forgot to sign the new ethics commitment form." I looked up at her, then at the sheet she placed on my desk. Forgot to sign? Me? Forget paperwork? That was about as likely as NASA forgetting to check gravity before a launch. I gave her a polite smile, the kind you use when you've already heard too many well-dressed lies, and picked up the document. At the top, it read, Artificial Intelligence Ethics Commitment, Revision Number 9. Number 9? Last I checked, we were still on version 7. The paper smelled like fresh ink and trouble. I flipped through the pages, paragraphs so long they could have been written by a half-asleep lawyer. Then I saw it, sitting neatly on line 8 of the middle section. The Executive Board reserves the right to expedite the ethical review process in cases of urgent commercial interest. I paused, reread it. Again. In plain English, that meant, if there's money to be made, we can skip the conscience part. My fingers brushed the edge of the page. This company used to be different. When I first joined Neuralink 12 years ago, it was small, clumsy, but alive. We talked about the future of AI, the way people talk about human decency. Back then, I truly believed technology could get better if people stayed good. But time changes everything, and Richard Vail, our new CEO, changed faster than anyone. He was the kind of man who walked into a room like it was a stage, always smiling, always speaking with that inflated optimism you hear in a TED Talk. Speed is the new ethics, he once said during an all-hands meeting. I nearly laughed out loud. I remember thinking, if speed is ethics, then a train crashing into a mountain must be an act of integrity. Richard liked to call himself the fixer, but he was more like a storm in a tailored suit. Wherever he went, people bowed down to sweep up the debris. Once, he slammed his desk so hard the coffee cup on mine jumped. I can still smell the burnt coffee that spilled over my keyboard. That afternoon, I sat in my office surrounded by 3 glowing monitors, combing through federal compliance logs for Neuralink's merger with Cortexa Global, a $350 million deal branded as a historic step for ethical AI. It sounded like a slogan written by marketing after a few too many drinks. Everyone was talking about the future and innovation. I was the only one who knew none of them actually understood what was happening. I wasn't the kind who posed for pictures on signing day or sat next to Richard at conferences. I was the one reading the fine print, tracing every audit trail, making sure our systems didn't accidentally break federal ethics clauses. Funny thing is, while they treated me like a cog in their shiny machine, that cog was the only thing keeping the whole engine from exploding. Leaning closer to the screen, I spotted something odd. A new command file had just been added, a shortcut that linked directly into the ethics module. If activated, it could skip the final verification step and send a compliant report in seconds. I zoomed in. The line of code had a name that tried too hard to sound harmless. Bypass key V9. Bypass. The word echoed in my head, cold and metallic. I leaned back, staring out the narrow window. Outside, the sun was setting over Silicon Valley's glass towers, its light glinting off every coffee cup and neon logo. This city ran on ambition and caffeine, and tonight, ethics seemed to be just another thing diluted in the mix. I thought of my brother, the one who died 8 years ago, in a self-driving car crash. The police called it an unforeseeable algorithmic error. I called it what it was, the consequence of a company that skipped its ethics review to make a launch date. That day, I joined Neuralink, believing I could stop something like that from ever happening again. And now, the very place I'd trusted was preparing to make the same mistake, only this time it was worth $350 million. I saved every log, encrypted the data on my private drive, and closed my laptop. By the time Linda came back for the paperwork, I had already signed. Beneath my signature, I wrote a single line small enough only for me to read. If they're going to sell this company's soul, I'll be the one holding the key. I didn't know what I would do yet, only that once people start removing the bricks of integrity, the whole building collapses, and I wasn't going to be standing under it. I looked up, took a deep breath. The smell of ink still lingered, Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. Probably Richard. I told myself quietly, then took a sip of cold coffee. I didn't know when the storm would hit, but I knew I'd already heard the wind. Richard Vale showed up the next morning like a man walking into a commercial about success. Silver tie, tailored suit, that white smile people wear when they've made too many promises to keep. He walked down the hallway with such confidence that others leaned aside, as if he owned the very air around him. I sat in the 12th floor conference room in the usual seat reserved for people invited for a show, not for speaking. The place smelled of expensive coffee and men's cologne. Richard began his speech with the same words I'd heard 1,000 times: breakthrough, innovation, speed, future. He talked about streamlining the ethics review process to accelerate the merger. His voice so smooth it made the whole room nod along like puppets. I looked around. No one objected. No one asked whether streamlining meant skipping human rights and data integrity checks. To them, every day the deal wasn't closed was a day the stock price didn't climb. I raised my hand. If we skip the ethics review, I said slowly, then legally, the merger loses federal validity, and morally, we lose the one thing that used to make this company different. The room fell silent for a few seconds before Richard smiled, a soft, practiced smile, the kind rich men use to make you feel like a child for asking a real question. Evelyn, he said, do you know what age we're living in? This year, AI can write novels and compose symphonies. I don't think a few outdated ethics protocols should hold us back. Forward or downward, sir? I murmured back, just loud enough for the person next to me to hear. The meeting ended with long applause. I didn't clap. Richard looked at me across the table, half amusement, half warning. I knew that look. The look of someone who doesn't like being reminded that there are still lines. That afternoon, when I returned to my office, an internal message popped up. Evelyn, could I see you for a moment? It was from Liam, the new tech on the ethics team, barely 3 months in. Tall, a little awkward, always with his headphones on, talking faster than he could think. We met at the cafe downstairs. Liam glanced around, voice dropping low. I think you should see this. He handed me a small USB. I found that the system logs were tampered with. Someone deleted entire lines of ethics audits from the records the same day Revision 9 was uploaded. I didn't act surprised. I just asked, who signed the approval? Liam hesitated, then said, Vale himself. I thanked him and slipped the USB into my coat pocket. Keep quiet, for now. Back in my office, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was firm, slightly raspy, a middle-aged woman used to being taken seriously. This is Dr. Olivia Reeve, legal counsel for Cortexa. I heard you're overseeing the ethics review for the merger? Yes, I said, at least until this morning. There's a rumor the final report was submitted before the review was complete. Can you confirm that? I stayed silent for a few seconds. Olivia wasn't the type to chase rumors. If she called, she already knew part of the truth. I can't confirm that over the phone, I said. But if someone sent that report, then they just signed their name on a lie. She sighed. Thank you, Evelyn. Be careful. At this level, truth tends to get edited more than data. Then she hung up. I sat there for a while, watching the screens glow on my hand. I didn't feel fear, just a cold awareness rising like groundwater. That night, after most employees had gone home, I reopened the internal report. In the approved by column, Richard Vale's signature glowed on the screen like wet ink. At the bottom was the line, Ethical Review Completed. A line I had never signed. I leaned back in my chair, scanning the empty room. The neon lights reflected off the wall like morgue lighting. I let out a quiet laugh, the kind you make when nothing surprises you anymore. I'd worked long enough to know every company has secrets, but few ever draft the death certificate for their own conscience. Before leaving, I copied all the logs to my private drive and added one short note. If anyone asks, this was the day they decided ethics was optional. The next morning, an internal email appeared in my inbox. Evelyn, thank you for your contributions. Effective immediately, you are no longer part of the merger compliance team. No explanation, no meeting, no discussion. I stared at the line, then said softly to myself, "Fine, do it your way. I just want to make sure that when the bridge collapses, everyone knows who gave the warning." I shut off my monitor. Outside, the San Francisco sky was bright and clear, but to me, the sunlight smelled like iron and dust. Maybe that's what trust smells like when it burns. Wednesday morning. If you've worked in a corporate office long enough, you know this rule. When they hand out free donuts midweek, it's never a gesture of kindness, it's a warning. I stared at the box of donuts sitting in the middle of the conference table. The smell of vanilla and powdered sugar mixed with something sharper in the air. Anxiety. Linda, the same HR rep who'd brought me the ethics commitment form, avoided my eyes as she walked in. Her look said it all before she spoke. Today was my day. "Evelyn, could you come to room 14? There's a short meeting," she said, voice trembling like someone about to throw another person off a lifeboat. Room 14. I'd never liked that number. It sat at the end of the hallway beside the storage room. When I stepped inside, 3 people were already waiting. Linda, a man in a gray suit, legal, most likely, and a young woman holding a notepad, probably the new HR trainee. No one invited me to sit, but I did anyway. I'd learned long ago, if they're going to cut your throat, at least let them do it while your head's still up. The man opened a cream envelope and began reading in a calm, bureaucratic tone, as if reciting the weather report. "Evelyn, thank you for your years of contribution to Neuralink. Due to restructuring and a shift toward a faster operational model, your position no longer aligns with the company's strategic direction." I let the words drift past. White noise from a broken radio. No need to ask questions. I'd seen this coming last week, the moment I saw Vale's signature on that fake audit. "We'll need your laptop, badge, and internal credentials by 3 p.m. today," Linda added, eyes fixed on the paper as if looking at me might burn her. I nodded, stood up, and walked out without a word. In the hallway, no one looked up. Strange, really. 12 years of nights fixing the system when it almost collapsed. 12 years of keeping us compliant while everyone else slept. And now, when I walk by, they just stared harder at their screens. At the front desk, I stopped. There, taped to the wall, was a printed photo of me under the sign, "Do not re-enter. Access revoked." Someone had drawn a red X over my face, thick, crooked, like blood. I stared at it for a few seconds, then let out a quiet laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how easily they turned a person into a warning. I didn't take the photo down. I just went to my desk and began packing my things: a ceramic mug, a few pens, thick binders, and the 10th anniversary card from 2 years ago, the one Vale hadn't signed. As I was about to leave, Liam appeared at the door. His face was pale. "They actually did it?" "Looks like it," I said, smiling faintly. "But it's fine. Is there anything I can do?" "Yes. Help yourself. Stay quiet, and back everything up before they wipe the system." He nodded, caught between fear and admiration. I knew what he was thinking: that I'd just become another cautionary tale. Outside, the bay wind was cool and sharp. The sky was too clear, almost artificial. I got in my car and unlocked my phone, not to call anyone. There was no one worth calling. I opened my private encryption app, entered the password, and accessed Neuralink's Federal Ethics Certificate System. A small lock icon appeared. Active. I stared at it for a moment, then tapped deactivate. The confirmation flashed. Ethical Liaison Certificate permanently revoked. Just one touch, no sound, no alarms. But I knew what was happening. Dozens of automated compliance chains across the system were already starting to collapse. Without a valid ethics certificate, the entire merger was legally void. I shut off my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and started the car. I felt no guilt. They called it termination. I called it release. When I got home, my small apartment in Pacific Heights was silent. No emails, no Slack pings, no sudden meeting alerts. Only the ticking clock and the wind brushing the windows. I set the box of my things on the kitchen counter. The old mug lay on its side, catching the last of the afternoon light. I looked at it and said quietly, "All right then, Let's see how they manage without the one holding the key. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just brewed a fresh cup of coffee, inhaled deeply, and listened to the faint whistle of the wind outside. Somewhere inside their glass tower, someone was probably panicking, trying to figure out why their system no longer had federal access. And me, I just sat in the sunset, calm, sipping my coffee. Some battles don't need knives or shouting, only someone who knows exactly which wire to pull. I couldn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but because of the silence. The strange kind of silence that follows when you've dropped a pebble into a still lake and know the ripples will travel far. The next morning, I opened my personal laptop and logged into my private data vault, the one only I had access to. Inside the secure drive was a folder labeled Federal Compliance Code 47B. I opened it. The papers were slightly yellowed, the corners neatly tagged with color-coded notes. I reread the section I'd helped draft years ago. The termination or replacement of a federally certified ethics liaison without a valid reauthorization process will render any ongoing merger null until a new certification is approved. I smiled. A thin, cold smile. The kind reserved for someone who knows exactly what game they're playing. They wanted speed? I'd given them speed, a shortcut straight into a wall. The phone on my desk vibrated. Unknown number, Cortexa Legal Department. I picked up. Mrs. Hart, this is Olivia Reeve. We've been notified that Neuralink's ethics certificate is no longer active. Can you confirm that? Completely accurate, I said, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. I was terminated yesterday. They haven't assigned a new federally certified liaison. There was a brief silence. Then Olivia spoke slowly. Then we'll have to suspend the entire merger until the issue is resolved. I understand. And Olivia, I said, lowering my voice, you might want to review Revision 9 in their ethics documentation. Some things don't line up. Thank you for the heads up, Mrs. Hart, she said, and I could hear her typing faster on the other end. Something tells me this is going to be a very long morning for a lot of people. After the call, I poured more coffee and opened the company newsfeed. Right on cue, there it was. Cortexa suspends $350 million merger with Neuralink due to federal compliance failure. Posted at 10:06 a.m. At 10:05, an email from Liam landed in my inbox. Just one line. They've lost it. I laughed quietly. Maybe that made me cruel, but there was something perfectly fair about watching people who thought they were untouchable panic inside the system they never bothered to understand. Liam later told me the tech floor was chaos. Vale had called an emergency meeting, slammed his hand on the table, and ordered the legal team to reinstate authentication rights. They didn't understand that those rights couldn't be reinstated. They were granted by a federal authority. No one inside the company could restore them without a recertification process, and that took at least 6 months. I pictured Vale then, red-faced, tie crooked, preaching about innovation and momentum, while locked out of the very door he'd slammed shut. By noon, a tech reporter posted on social media, rumor, Neuralink Cortexa merger on hold due to AI ethics concerns. Sources suggest irregularities in the certification process. I read it while sipping my third cup of coffee. The steam curled in thin spirals, smelling faintly of burnt caramel. I smiled again. They didn't know the real cause yet, but the cloud was already forming. By afternoon, my phone rang again. An internal Neuralink number. This is Vale, he barked, voice tight but trying for composure. Can you tell us what the hell is happening with the federal system? Your certificate's malfunctioning? Not at all, I said. It's perfectly valid. I just don't work for your company anymore. All right, he snapped. But you can still reactivate the credentials, can't you? For everyone's sake. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to hear it. Under federal law, only a current authorized liaison can access the system. You understand what that means, right? He exhaled hard. You're joking. You know where we are in this process? Hundreds of people depend on this deal. I know, I said softly. Maybe you should have thought about that before you signed my termination papers. Then I hung up. No more words needed. That evening, Liam sent me a screenshot. Internal chat threads buzzing about Code 47B. The clause no one had ever bothered to read. Someone had finally found it in the archived regulations and started piecing the puzzle together. By 8 p.m., one last message from Liam arrived. Vale's in an emergency board meeting. Everyone's blaming each other. I think the story breaks tomorrow morning. I sat alone, the warm light pooling across the wooden table, the coffee in my cup cooling slowly. I didn't feel joy, just a deep, steady quiet inside me. The kind that comes when you watch justice move the way it should, slow, precise, unstoppable. They used to call me rigid, too principled, out of sync with market speed. Maybe they were right. I wasn't flexible. I didn't bend the rules to make anyone comfortable. I simply followed the very laws they wrote and conveniently forgot. Before going to bed, I opened Code 47B one last time and added a new note in the margin. April 3rd. Clause activated by those who thought it didn't matter. Then I closed the folder, turned off the light, and for the first time in years, I slept well. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight sliced through the blinds into long bands across the wooden floor. I made coffee, set the cup on the table, and checked my phone. 32 unread messages, most from unknown numbers, a few I did not need to open to know who they were. Evelyn, please call back. We need to talk. Can we handle this privately? One message was shorter and colder. I hope you understand you are destroying yourself. Richard Vale. I let out a small laugh. The tone sounded like a man trying to scare someone with a toy gun. By 10 a.m., the first headline hit the feeds. Neuralink's ethics authentication failure halts $350 million deal. Below it, 100 comments from industry folks and tech writers guessing at causes, while none of them knew the real story. I sat in my armchair, legs crossed, reading each comment and sipping coffee with a small smile. Maybe ethics should be updated to version 2.0, someone wrote. Another replied that maybe they should hire the person who pulled the plug to rewrite the process. I thought to myself, wait, and they will do exactly that. By noon, Vale pushed back. He held an emergency press briefing, standing under the giant Neuralink logo, voice steady like a TED Talk presenter. The deal is under control, he said. We are working closely with federal agencies to resolve a technical issue. A technical issue. I laughed and knocked over half my cup. It sounded like he thought ethics was a broken chip you could swap with a screwdriver. An email arrived from Mason Quinn, a lawyer I had worked with on federal audits. Subject line, I think you should be ready. Mason did not waste words. In the message, he wrote that Vale had hired a shadow IT team to try to restore authentication. They were scanning systems for vulnerabilities. Make sure your original evidence is encrypted and safe, I replied briefly. Don't worry. I prepared before they figured it out. That afternoon, Liam called on video. He looked hollow, the screen light catching his eyes. They are blaming you, he said. Vale told the company you deleted the certificate to extort money. Extort money? I raised an eyebrow. They should be paying me for my honesty. No one dares speak, he said. They are trying to brute force the federal server. Vale hired an outside group to hack in. I paused. Liam, do exactly as I say, I told him. Pull all your personal data off the system. Do not log back in. If they ask, say you know nothing. Do you understand? Yes, he whispered. I do not want to get dragged into this. Good. Remember, silence is the strongest wall when everyone else panics. I went out on the balcony. The San Francisco sky hazed into evening. Lights along the Bay Bridge began to flicker on. Vale, who always called himself the problem solver, had become a problem without a fix. Around 8 p.m., Mason called again. Federal investigators opened a formal probe, he said. Vale is scrambling to divert attention, but it is too late. Good, I said. Do you need anything from me? Keep the status quo, he answered, and maybe sleep tonight. The press will name you tomorrow. No need, I said. I have nothing to hide. Before he hung up, Mason added, I have met hundreds in this field, but few keep their principles when everything collapses. Congratulations. I told him I did not want congratulations. I only wanted the truth to stand. That night, I left the lights off. My laptop was the only glow in the room. A headline read, "The woman who pulled the plug on the biggest AI deal of the year." The photo was from a conference years ago, my eyes steady at the camera, my face calm. A top comment pinned beneath read, "She did not sabotage anything. She pulled the cord before anyone got electrocuted." I read it 3 times and smiled. Sometimes, strangers understand you better than anyone who used to share your office. I closed the laptop, moved to the window. The wind slipped the curtains, sharp and clean. Across the way, their tower still burned light. Probably Vale and his team still trying to fix the ethics certificate. I was not there to fix anything. I was there to let things work exactly as they were written. Tomorrow they would understand. Tonight I wanted quiet. I made another cup of coffee, sat down, and let the city drift into fog. If this were a fight, I had chosen my weapons, truth and time. 2 things Vale never learned to use. The next morning, just as Mason predicted, my name flooded every news site. The woman who brought down a $350 million AI merger. Former ethics director exposes scandal inside Neuralink Dynamics. The keeper of the final key, and why she pulled it out. Each headline was a different cut of the same story. Some painted me as a hero. Others, no doubt sponsored by Neuralink, called me a bitter ex-employee out for revenge. I didn't feel angry. In this game, everyone builds their own version of the truth, the one that serves them best. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. I turned it off. I didn't want to explain anything. Every word that mattered was already written in what I'd done. By noon, Mason texted, "Federal authorities have ordered Neuralink to suspend all activity with Cortexa. The executive team is being investigated for certification fraud." I replied, "Good. Justice finally showed up to work on time." Around 2 p.m., Liam called. His voice shook somewhere between fear and excitement. "Evelyn, Vale's losing it. He's shouting at everyone, the tech team, legal, whoever's left in the building. The whole place feels like a storm." "And you?" I asked. I stayed quiet. They started asking who flagged code 47B, but I didn't say anything. I remembered what you told me. "Good. Stay quiet. Don't play the hero. Heroes die early. Truth lives longer." He hesitated, then whispered, "Evelyn, I think they'll try to reach you. Vale doesn't know how to lose." I smiled faintly. I know. He's the kind of man who believes everything has a price. He just never learned the value of what can't be bought: credibility. Later that afternoon, an email popped up from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, "We need to talk, RV." I didn't open it. I deleted it without a second thought. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. No caller ID. "Evelyn, it's me, Vale." His voice had lost the sharpness from his press conferences. It carried fatigue, a trace of bitterness. "Can we talk like adults?" he began. "Depends on your definition of adult," I said evenly. "I'm not calling to argue," he said. "I just want to understand why. You could have asked for anything: compensation, a new role, even an apology. Why choose destruction?" I paused, then answered slowly. "I didn't destroy anything, Richard. I just stopped protecting people who were destroying themselves. I'm not a punishment, I'm consequence." He exhaled. "You realize you've cost hundreds of people their jobs?" I closed my eyes, feeling the faint breeze through the curtains. "No, Richard, you did that. I just cut the power before the whole building exploded." "You think the world will respect you for that?" he shot back. "The press may praise you today, but tomorrow they'll forget. You'll just be another headline." I laughed softly. "Maybe, but at least when they forget, I'll still sleep well." Silence hung for a moment. Then Vale spoke quietly, almost like a confession. "You've won, Evelyn. You know that, don't you?" "No, Richard. I haven't won. I just kept the part of myself that wasn't for sale." I hung up before he could answer. That night, rain fell over San Francisco, a rare visitor this time of year. I always liked nights like that, cool enough to soothe, quiet enough to hear your own thoughts. I sat by the window, laptop open, the blue glow washing over my face. A notification appeared. Cortexa officially terminates merger with Neuralink. 4 short, cold lines. But I knew each word was an explosion in their boardroom. Around 10, Mason called again. They've lost nearly 60% of their market value in 2 days. Vale just resigned. I didn't reply right away. I looked out the window where the city lights shimmered through the rain, silver as ash. You know, I said slowly, he once told me speed was the new ethics. Maybe now he understands real ethics move at their own pace. Slow, but steady. Mason laughed softly through the phone. You're something else, Evelyn. I'm not, I said. I'm just someone who knows which wire to pull. After the call, I closed the laptop and walked across the quiet room. On the table, my coffee had gone cold. I touched the cup. The chill ran through my fingertips. I thought of the people who'd laughed the day I warned them, of Vale's look when he still believed he was untouchable. Now they were staring at the wreckage, wondering who caused it all. The answer was simple. They did, with arrogance, carelessness, and the belief that rules were made only for smaller people. I whispered to the night beyond the window. The world doesn't fall apart because people make mistakes. It falls apart because some believe they never do. Then I went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and thought to myself, tomorrow I'll start over. But this time, on my own terms. Monday morning. The city was still damp from the night's rain, the air cool and clean, as if the world had been washed. I sat by the window, watching droplets trace long lines down the glass, a warm cup of coffee in my hand. On my screen, the newest headline about Neuralink read, Vale resigns, as Neuralink loses 68% of its market value in 4 days. Just below it, in smaller text, former ethics director Evelyn Hart praised for early warning on AI ethics risks. I skimmed the article, then closed the screen. I wasn't looking for praise. I just wanted quiet. But quiet is never something this world lets you keep. Near noon, the doorbell rang. On the camera feed stood a man in a gray coat, neatly dressed in that bureaucratic way. In his hand, a large envelope stamped with the seal of the Federal Ethics Bureau. I opened the door. Mrs. Hart? That's me. We'd like to speak briefly about data related to the Neuralink Cortexa case. May we come in? I nodded and stepped aside. There were 2 of them. The woman who entered second opened her case and pulled out a stack of documents. We understand you were the architect of Neuralink's security framework, she said. We need your confirmation on several logs that were altered before the merger was suspended. I looked at the papers. I knew those lines by heart. They were the same records Vale had erased before submitting to the federal board. Yes, I said. Those entries were tampered with. And if I'm not mistaken, the metadata still holds the traces. I kept the originals. The man nodded. Good. That'll help a lot. We're collecting evidence to determine who falsified the ethics report. If your statement checks out, Vale and several executives could face criminal charges. I gave a faint nod. Justice may be slow, but when it arrives, it carries weight. They left after half an hour. I stood in the doorway, watching their car fade into the fog. Inside me was a strange mix of calm and emptiness. When you've spent years protecting something and finally watch it fall, no matter the reason, you can't help but feel the hollow space it leaves behind. That afternoon, Liam texted me. I left Neuralink, got a new job in Boston. Small startup, but they actually care about AI ethics. I just wanted to say thank you. I replied, hold on to that, Liam. One day you'll realize ethics isn't a barrier, it's the frame that keeps the structure standing. That night, I walked through Market Street. Neon signs for AI for humanity glowed across glass towers, and I couldn't help but laugh. Everyone talked about ethics. Few lived by it. When I got home, there was an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a cream-colored card with neat handwriting across it. Next time, they'll know who built the bridge. O.R. Olivia Reeve. I read the note, feeling a quiet kind of recognition, not pride, not satisfaction, but the simple relief of being understood by someone who knew what it cost. I set the card on my desk. The lamplight caught the edge of the paper, gleaming softly like a quiet affirmation. After everything, I no longer belonged to Neuralink. But one thing was certain: my work would be remembered in every AI merger that followed. No one wanted to repeat that mistake. I opened my laptop and logged into my new business account, Hart Integrity Consulting LLC. Within 2 weeks, I'd already received 3 partnership inquiries, one of them from a name that made me smile: Neuralink Dynamics. They wanted to hire me as an external advisor for their new compliance framework. The irony was delicious. The woman they once called a roadblock to progress had become their condition for survival. I replied politely, briefly, "I'm open to reviewing your request, so long as you understand that this time I won't be working for you. I'll be working for the truth. Sent." I leaned back in my chair. Outside, the city lights were dimming. I smiled faintly, a smile light as breath. Maybe this was no longer revenge. Maybe it was balance, restored by the very rules they'd forgotten to follow. I lifted my cup, watching the steam rise and blur before me. In that moment, I knew with perfect clarity they'd lost hundreds of millions, and I had gotten myself back. 3 months later, summer returned to San Francisco. The city glowed in sunlight, the air soft and clear, but inside me everything had settled, like a lake after a storm. I kept my old habits: brewing coffee early, playing quiet jazz, and starting the day from my small apartment in Pacific Heights. My desk was tidier now: just my laptop, a stack of client folders, and Olivia's card framed in glass. Besides it, the new logo of my firm, Hart Integrity Consulting LLC, with the tagline, "Ethics isn't a choice, it's the foundation." Work had become steady. I advised a growing list of mid-sized tech companies, people who, after Neuralink's collapse, finally understood that ethics wasn't some abstract philosophy. It was a survival license. This morning's meeting was with a new client, Ironstream Robotics, an AI company designing medical robots. Their silver-haired CEO said during our call, "We want to avoid the road Neuralink took. I read about your case. Honestly, that's why we came to you." I smiled. If you truly want to avoid their mistake, remember this: ethics doesn't slow progress. It just makes sure you're moving in the right direction. How fast you go, that's on you. When the meeting ended, I checked my inbox. A new email from Neuralink Dynamics. Subject: Partnership Proposal, a new chapter. They wanted to hire Heart Integrity Consulting to rebuild their federal ethics framework. The signature wasn't Vale's, he was long gone, but Angela Ward's, their new interim CEO and former head of HR. I read the letter 3 times, a strange mix of deja vu and distance. At the bottom, Angela had written, "We acknowledge our past mistakes, and we believe only the person who once kept us on course can help us find it again." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stepped onto the balcony, looking down at the narrow street below. Sunlight glared off the damp pavement. Maybe I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was calm. My phone rang. Liam. "I heard Neuralink wants you back," he said. "Are you going to take it?" "I haven't decided," I told him. "Do you think I should?" "I think you should," he said. "Not because they deserve it, but because if you don't, they'll hire someone else, and it'll happen all over again. Maybe this time they actually need you to teach them how to do it right." I paused. He was right. Sometimes life doesn't hand you revenge. It hands you the chance to teach a lesson. That evening, I called Mason. "I got an offer from Neuralink," I said. "They want a consulting contract." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking yes, but with conditions." "What kind?" "I want them to sign a new ethics charter that binds not just the company, but every executive individually. Every signature must be real, no anonymous approvals, no collective shields." Mason laughed softly. "You never do anything halfway." "I don't," I said. "Ethics doesn't come in beta versions." After the call, I reopened Angela's email and typed, "I'm willing to collaborate under one condition. All processes and signatures must be public, and any breach will be reported directly to the federal board. If Neuralink is ready for transparency, I'm ready to return, not as an employee, but as a guardian of principle. I hit send. 2 days later, their reply came. We accept all conditions. I wasn't surprised. Neuralink didn't have much of a choice. The following week, I returned to the old building. The glass walls and white halls were the same, but the air felt lighter. People looked at me differently now, not with fear or distance, but with respect, even gratitude. Angela greeted me at the entrance, her smile more sincere than any apology could be. "Welcome back, Evelyn," she said. "This time, we'll rebuild it the right way." I walked into the same conference room where I'd once been fired. The long table was still there, though the chair at its head sat empty. I took a seat, opened my laptop, and said calmly, "Let's begin. We'll redesign the entire ethics framework, from procedures and authorization to data transparency. Not just to erase the past, but to make sure it never repeats." The room fell silent. Around the table, young engineers and managers watched me, not with doubt, but with belief that something real was shifting. The session lasted until late afternoon. When I stepped outside, the sky was washed in gold. Sunlight poured through the glass walls and touched my face, warm, steady, forgiving. In the lobby, I stopped. The old portraits of Vale were gone, the hollow slogans, too. In their place hung a new plaque: "Integrity is not optional. E. Hart." I stood there for a long time, not proud, just mindful that sometimes justice doesn't arrive with an explosion. Sometimes it comes in the form of a signature written in the right place. That night, back home, I wrote in my journal, "Day 92 since the firing." They asked me to return, not to apologize, but to learn. And maybe that's the most elegant revenge of all. It's been some time since I returned to Neuralink as an independent consultant. The city is as busy as ever, but inside that glass tower, everything feels different. Every time I walk through the lobby, I feel like I'm stepping into a new version of the company, one where people finally tell the truth, where ethics isn't a slogan on the wall, but a daily habit. Neuralink, the name once tied to a scandal, has slowly become an example of disciplined revival. And what's strange is that change didn't come from flashy campaigns or public apologies. It started in quiet meetings, where people learned to listen to their own conscience again. I no longer work full time. I come in twice a week, enough to observe, to guide, and sometimes just to sit silently while they debate. Every time I hear a young engineer say, "We can't release until the ethics review is complete," something inside me feels mended. One Friday morning, Angela walked into the office while I was reviewing the final draft of the new compliance system. "Evelyn," she said, "the federal committee approved the new ethics framework. They're calling it the industry's new gold standard." I looked up at her smile, a sincere one, untouched by ambition. "Good," I said. "That means we did it." Angela nodded, then hesitated. "If you don't mind, I'd like to name the framework after you. The Hart Framework." I went quiet for a moment, not from pride, but surprise. "There's no need," I said softly. "I didn't do this to have my name on a wall." "We know," Angela replied, smiling. "That's exactly why it belongs there." Through the window, the city still buzzed, loud and relentless, but in that room, everything felt calm. That afternoon, I left the building. The glass doors closed behind me, reflecting my shadow and the new gold letters mounted in the lobby. The Hart Framework, Integrity by Design. On my way home, my phone rang. Liam. "Did you see it?" he said, breathless. "Everyone in the industry's talking about the framework. I'm using it at my new company. Now every developer has to complete ethics training before writing their first line of code." I smiled. "Good. That's how justice spreads. Quietly, but steadily." "I always thought you'd get your revenge differently," Liam joked. "I didn't get revenge, Liam," I said. "I just reset the board and taught them how to play by the rules." By the time I got home, the sky was painted gold. Sunlight slanted through the window, glinting off Olivia's old card on my desk, the one she sent me months ago. "Next time, they'll know who built the bridge." I picked it up, smiling. They know now." That night, I sat at my computer and drafted a new email to my team, 6 people now, all former employees who'd lived through Neuralink's collapse. The subject line read, Next Project. Inside, I wrote, We're helping a new startup in Seattle, an AI platform for education. Our goal isn't just to ensure compliance, but to help them understand why ethics must lead progress. We don't fix mistakes, we rebuild foundations. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. In the quiet room, the soft hum of the fan blended with the sound of my breathing. On the screen, my company's small logo glowed, Heart Integrity Consulting. Ethics is the architecture. I thought back to it all, the morning I was fired, Vale's cold stare, the photo of me crossed out in red, the laughter in that conference room when I spoke about ethics, and then the looks I saw today, trust, respect, relief. I whispered to myself, sometimes the best revenge is making people live inside the lesson they once ignored. I turned off the lights, leaving only the city's glow filtering through the curtains. Outside, the sound of cars mingled with the evening wind. I took one last sip of coffee, and in that moment, I knew my story hadn't ended in ruins, but in order. No revenge, no apology, just the truth, standing firm. I looked out at the city through the glass, the last light flickering between buildings, and somewhere out there, maybe you're hearing this story. If you were me, the day they cut you out of the place you helped build, what would you have done? Stay quiet or stand up, not with rage, but with calm, deliberate action? Which moment in this story moved you most? Was it when I pulled the key that brought the empire down? Or when I came back, not for revenge, but to rebuild what was right? Leave your thoughts below. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories where justice finds its way, quietly but surely, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening. I'm Evelyn Hart, and maybe, in some way, this story is yours too.